Hi, everyone. Welcome to Johns Hopkins at Home. My name is Jim Liu. I'm an associate professor at the Johns Hopkins Carey Business School. Today, I am so excited. So we are going to discuss with Christy Weiskill, who runs JHTV, all the wonderful things that JHTV has been doing over the last 5 years. So first off, please put your questions into the chat. We want to make this as interactive as possible. Ask us any question you want, any hard question about technology ventures and the ecosystem. We encourage that. Our objectives today is to educate the Johns Hopkins community about the commercialization process, also update our community about the JHU resources to commercialize that are currently available, and celebrate the 5-year anniversary of JHTV. Also, we're going to provide some examples, some success stories out of Johns Hopkins, and this is really, really interesting. You will be shocked and amazed of some of the great technology that's coming out from our school. And finally, we're going to conclude with a discussion on the impact of COVID-19 on the market for startups. So without further ado, let me kick it over to Christy so she can introduce herself, and then we'll get into it. Christy?
Great, thank you, Jim. This is such a great opportunity. Really appreciate all our friends and alumni joining. As Jim said, I'm Christy Weiskill, and I'm about to hit my 7th anniversary here at Johns Hopkins. It has just been a wonderful, wonderful ride to get to work with our students and our faculty and our alumni, and so many of you that are engaged. And I'm excited to tell you a little bit about what's going on, our ecosystem, some of our really exciting startups. I also just want to thank Jim. We'll kick it back to him in a moment to tell a little bit more about what he does at the Carey Business School. But I will say that I had the great honor of teaching a class alongside Jim, a class in entrepreneurial finance this past semester. Jim had created this course. He has taught it in person. He has taught it virtually. I taught it during the pandemic, so it was my students were on Zoom class, but we had a really great group, and I just really appreciate the ties between Johns Hopkins Technology Ventures and the business school. We work so much with the other schools in terms of technology transfer, but to get an opportunity to work with our MBA students, to work with the new dean at the Carey Business School, to work with faculty like Jim has just been a really important part, and I look forward to building on that. So, Jim, you asked me, I think, to speak a little bit about my background and how I came to Hopkins. Is that where we should start? Is that where you'd like to start?
Absolutely.
Okay. For those that you don't know, I spent an entire career before coming to Hopkins as an institutional investor and an entrepreneur. And so what I really bring to this role, and the reason I was so incredibly lucky to get tapped by President Daniels 7 years ago, is that I try to bring as much of a business creation, company creation, and entrepreneurial mindset to what we are doing here. And so what is it that we are doing? We have thousands of students and faculty that are innovative, that have great ideas, that want to bring impact to the world. And that's everything from innovative ways to treat mental health to ways to test for COVID. And really everything in between. And so how can we enable and support our community to do this? So this really was a very organic journey that brought me here. I had been a healthcare institutional investor for most of my career. I've been in Baltimore physically for more than 20 years. And I spent several years after my time on Wall Street helping local entrepreneurs, primarily out of Johns Hopkins, start companies, raise venture dollars, do deals with the pharma biotech industry, and it really opened my eyes to the possibilities. And the possibilities are limitless. As those of you know that are friends of this institution, the breadth and depth of the activity here, of the brilliance of people just working on so many different things that are making the world a better place, made me realize that there was an opportunity to scale and build resources for those individuals. And so whether we're talking about a young undergraduate student who is interested in really any sort of new, one of our most innovative undergrads, Pavel Lapere, has created an eco map for connecting entrepreneurs across communities. And she created an entire accelerator program as an undergrad for students, all the way to and through seasoned faculty such as Bert Vogelstein, Ken Kinzer, Nick Papadopoulos, who are some of the most innovative thinkers in cancer diagnostics. And so it really runs the gamut in what we're trying to do and what we're trying to help. And the role of Johns Hopkins Technology Ventures is to meet that entrepreneur where they are, provide them with what they need. That might be lab space, that might be mentorship, that might be translational funding. And we have a team of folks that are ready to do just that.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, first of all, thanks a lot for teaching that entrepreneurial finance class. That's one of my favorite classes to teach. I actually inherited that class from the late Gary Jonas. And Phil Fan was encouraging me to sort of broaden my horizons because, you know, I'm kind of a Wall Street finance guy like Christy. And he said, hey, you should really look at this. It's very interesting. And that class is wonderful. It provides students sort of the background, you know, where to get capital from. Is it venture capital? Is it private equity? Understanding the landscapes from the institutional investor. And basically, it's a class about your life as an institutional investor, as an entrepreneur. So I was like, Christy would be perfect to teach this class. So when that opportunity came up, you know, I'm so glad that we are so happy that you're, you know, teaching with us. Every time I see business school students coming through the business school, I say, and then they have any interest in entrepreneurship, I say, you got to go to JHTV, you got to see what they're doing there, and you got to just get involved. I know you guys have some interesting internship programs, and we got to figure out how to integrate the business school with you guys more so. But I've been to JHTV a few times, and it's always been a wonderful experience. Christy has a wonderful team. They're all very knowledgeable, and they're pushing in the right direction. So as Christy came here about 7.5 years ago or 7 years ago, I also joined the community about that same time. And at that time, you know, the innovation was scattered all over the place. So you've done a really amazing job of sort of bringing things together so that it's, you know, understandable, digestible, and also educating the faculty how to do this stuff. So what I want to do first of all, and let's just back up a second here, you know, let's have a conversation first about, you know, what is commercialization? What does that mean from the university setting? So like we're bringing aboard new faculty, and if they have any ideas, how should they sort of start thinking about what is the right path to take? Should they be patenting on them by themselves? That it should be working with you right when they get the idea? Sort of help us understand the commercialization process.
Sure. Thank you so much, Jim. You know, this the university technology transfer is an industry that was almost created from whole cloth in the 1980s by something called the Bayh-Dole Act. And that whole process is a little too boring for a spicy talk like this. But I guess I'll say that that it was that moment in time where the federal government said, institutions are getting federal dollars through the NIH, through the National Science Foundation, through all of these grant-making organizations, and we want to encourage these entrepreneurial faculty, these innovators, these teachers, these researchers to bring products to market. Products like GPS, products like new vaccines, HDTV, I believe, was one of MIT's biggest technology transfer wins. And so just the idea that we want to take things created in the lab, often with our tax dollars, and bring them to market is an industry that at every peer institution like ours has some form of what's called technology transfer. Now, what that means to us at Johns Hopkins is that if someone invents something at the lab, in their lab, of course they're going to write about that and tell the world, but is there also an opportunity to make a product out of that? And so when you think about it from a diagnostic test or a medical device or a piece of software or a piece of energy technology, all of those things can go on and impact the world in a better place. So what do? We try to take those ideas from the labs and dorm rooms of Johns Hopkins and bring those to be tangible products to market. There are two ways that, just to simplify the world that we live in, to do that. One is to invent that, put some intellectual property around that, patents, copyrights, et cetera, which the university bears the cost for. And then we license that to a big company. So we might license that to a big tech company or a pharmaceutical company. Alternatively, if the technology needs some incubation, it needs some work, it needs some investment, we might actually help to create a startup to do that. So kind of two main ways: either license it to an existing company or help to create a company to do that. And through one of those, hopefully, we will see products come to market as a result of that.
Absolutely. No, that's very helpful. You know, I'm more of a finance guy and I do some technology stuff, but I know there's a difference between sort of biotech startups and software-based solutions, right? So could you help us sort of understand what's the difference? And in particular, you know, is it so different that you need two different skills, or is it sort of, is there a lot of overlap? And, you know, how do we encourage our faculty and our researchers and students, you know, to go to one direction or the other? I know Hopkins is world famous both in biomedical engineering and also in the computer science department, but I'm just curious, how do you think about that? How should we be thinking about software solutions versus biotech solutions? And maybe to the extent, you know, what is a hard tech versus a soft tech?
Yeah, no, thank you for that question, Jim. We went back and looked at the number of reports of invention. That's sort of our fodder for who is reporting, who's invented something and told our office about it. And that number, we're usually top 5 in the world on that, just the pure volume of new things getting invented at Johns Hopkins, anywhere from 400 to 500 a year. So really voluminous in terms of the creativity that is happening right here on our campuses. So what does that mean from a software perspective? When we went back and looked at the reports of inventions that were software 10 years ago, 5 years ago today, that number is rising. And that is, by the way, across the schools. It's not only at the Whiting School of Engineering, which of course very robust, has a computer science department, and really across the board is smart and savvy and thoughtful on everything from cybersecurity to robotic software, but also at the other schools, whether it's nursing, the School of Public Health, School of Medicine. Some of our most successful commercial examples are actually software from other schools. And so I think the main difference, and this is irrespective of the fact that it comes out of university, the main difference in software products versus biotech and life sciences is just simply the development time and amount of capital that is required, because of course one can bring software to market in some way. You know, you and I, Jim, could come up with a great idea for an app and it could be on the market next week, whereas any life sciences product, from diagnostic to devices to drug, will take years most of the time. So we really focus on the intellectual property function. There are different ways to protect software. There are different ways to protect various forms of life sciences technology. But again, we look at it as enabling the faculty member where they are, or the student where they are, and really just try to be a help with the end goal, that end product in mind.
Excellent, excellent. And you know, being a finance professor, I want to talk a little bit about the numbers. Like how much is invested into this R&D in the Hopkins ecosystem, and you know, how many disclosures have you had, and how much, you know, value add, if you can put some numbers on it, just so that our viewers understand the impact that, you know, JHTV is having to the community, and also Baltimore and the state of Maryland and so forth. Could you just sort of paint us the picture?
Absolutely. And Jim, I think one of the things I'm most proud of is the team that we have put together that does this. And when you look at our teams, whether it's our Fast Forward team that focuses on our startups and the space resources, translational funding, and mentors that we provide to this community, whether it's our technology transfer team that works every day alongside the inventors and helps them with the patents, trademarks, copyrights, helps to license those technologies, helps to understand all the intricacies of the patent claims and what happens there, or our corporate partnership team. No matter kind of where you are in, you know, in that world, it is the team that has put forth what we're doing, and the results have been nothing short of spectacular, because we've got a great team and we've had the leadership support and the resources to do exactly that. So where have we been and where have we gone? Before we created this, as you mentioned, last year, Johns Hopkins Technology Ventures celebrated our 5th anniversary. And before that, we were bringing anywhere from, you know, 50 million or so in venture funding into companies created out of Hopkins technology. In the last 5 years, we are close to 500 million a year. in venture funding coming into
Wait,
these.
$500 million? That's a lot of money. That's like a half.
500 million a year.
Wow.
And we've had some really big raises. We've had companies, we have A rounds, we have later rounds, but really proud of the fact that we are a front door to the venture industry. We have a dedicated individual who goes out and meets with the venture world, invites them for bespoke visits with our students and faculty to help them better understand what's going on. So that's one thing. The second is that our run rate for licensing revenue, which is another metric of tech transfer offices. What are the licensing revenues that come in as a result of royalties and milestones for these products that were created here and that are licensed to industry? We were hovering in the kind of $15 million range. And this year, I'm very proud to say we're going to be north of 25 million.
Wow, congratulations.
We've had a couple really big wins in the last 5 years. We're actually north of 300 million since the creation of JHTV. And then the final thing, just on the pure numbers, we've helped over 80 companies through the creation process. And we're very proud to say that while very few of those companies, when we started on this journey, stayed in Baltimore, that over half of those are now choosing to locate here. So having that ecosystem in and around our universities, our students can work at summer internships, they can work at full-time jobs, they can help with company creation, that our faculty can look around and see other entrepreneurs creating value, raising venture dollars, bringing products to market. That is such an important part of what we're doing. And Jim, we know that not every company will choose to stay here in Baltimore. There are reasons that people go to Boston or California that are the hotspots where a lot of the investor dollars are. But we really are excited about some of the promising companies that have chosen to locate here.
Absolutely. So, that's actually a pretty good transition into some of the success stories. So, I'm just going to, ask you for, what are some organizations, companies, maybe give us like the picture, the color, how did they get started all the way from maybe an undergraduate startup to a seasoned researcher, world famous professor who started some things. Maybe you can highlight some of our success stories so far.
Absolutely. And I do want to, I know you said this at the beginning, Jim, but I want to encourage folks as you're listening, we'd be delighted to take your questions. I think there's a forum, a way to do that on the website. So really delighted to answer those. So please send those in and we'll get to those in very short order. So, the specific companies, I love the storytelling aspect here because it's so palpable and we've got so many really unlimited great stories to tell about the companies and ventures that have been created. I'll start with a couple. One are two medical students that I worked with, Robert Lord and Nick Culbertson, and they were in medical school and applied to an accelerator program that we ran a few years ago. And they were very interested. They had actually worked prior to coming to medical school, one in finance and one worked in an Army intelligence role. And they were really interested in the intersection of data and healthcare and what could be done in leveraging technology for unsolved problems in healthcare. And they went on to create a company through this accelerator that we ran alongside the Dream It organization. And the company was called ProTennis. Well, if you fast forward to today, pun intended, I guess, fast forward to today, ProTennis has something in the neighborhood of 70 employees. They're located right here in downtown Baltimore. That company has raised, I believe, north of 30 million in venture capital, maybe more than that at last check. And they have over 100 customers of hospitals and health organizations all across the world, and they are solving some of their most vexing cybersecurity problems in healthcare, initially related to the electronic medical record and making sure, Jim, that the information that you and I have and others and the millions of other folks with electronic medical records, that data is protected. But they have since gone and listened to their customers and are building other products. So that's just one great example. They were students. They actually took a leave of absence to start this company, and the rest is history. If you go to another great example, we have an organization that we run as part of Fast Forward called the Social Innovation Lab. And the Social Innovation Lab has teams and mission-driven companies and not-for-profits, not only from the Johns Hopkins ecosystem, but from across the community. We run usually about 10 teams a year go through this cohort, and the most recent cohort, I was actually just watching a number of their pitches, of course, all virtual this year. We usually have a big event in the spring. So I was just watching some of their online pitches, and some of the amazing programs that are run by, for example, Bree Jones at Parity, who is developing entire blocks of abandoned homes to help create stable neighborhoods and wealth. I mean, just really interesting work, taking her finance background, her real estate background, bringing that to bear right here in Baltimore. There's another former educator named Ashley Williams, part of the Social Innovation Lab. Again, these are our community members that logged into this organization, and delighted they went through our programs, called Infinite Focus School. She actually taught Small World Connection. Ashley taught for many years at something called Southwest Baltimore Charter School, right here near the B&O Railroad Museum. Some of you might remember that here in West Baltimore. Ashley was a teacher for a number of years and very focused on mindfulness and using mindfulness and meditation to meet children where they're needed and to help them in the classroom. Since has expanded that to a number of schools, and the program and the results so far are really outstanding. So people like Ashley and Bree that are bringing great ideas, scaling them, we're helping in any way that we can connect them to investors, foundations, et cetera, doing our very best. And then at the other end of the spectrum, when it comes to faculty startup, the kind of classic tech transfer, there are companies like Thrive Cancer Detect, started, as I mentioned, out of the lab of Bert Vogelstein, Ken Kinsler, Nick Papadopoulos, and others, that have created an early stage cancer test that I believe within our lifetimes will be the standard of care. Just like we get our cholesterol tested every year from a certain age on, it is likely we will get a cancer test. I think Thrive has cracked the nut on the science there. They've got large ongoing trials. I think we're more to hear. And the thing that gets me most excited when I wake up every morning are companies like Thrive choosing to base locations here. They have a research franchise right here in the 1812 building near the Vogelstein lab and the hospital here in East Baltimore. They're continuing to hire, and it just, I think it just really shows what the future of these enterprises can mean.
Absolutely. Yeah. So Vogelstein is a superstar at Hopkins, and he's had a tremendous impact on cancer. I mean, I was shocked to see how large their Series A round was, right? I mean, how does a company start out and raise $110 million for Series A? I mean, has that ever happened at Hopkins?
It hasn't. That was, no, Jim, that was our largest Series A round ever. And I think there are a few reasons for that. First of all, the investor group behind Thrive, which was led by Third Rock Ventures, was visionary, and they understand where this could go. There's actually one of Bert's former students, Christoph Langauer, who went on to be a very successful biotech entrepreneur, ended up as a Third Rock partner, and was very helpful in the formation of that company and working with Bert. And so I think one of the things is you've got to have an investor group that understands how to scale and what to do, and really how to speak the language of academia. I think the second major piece with Thrive, again, which I'm just thrilled with, they've got a fabulous CEO who used to work at Alumni named David Daly, who's wonderful. Isaac Kindy, who's one of Bert's students, was one of the co-founders there, who went to undergrad at UMBC and did his PhD here. So just a real all-star cast. I think when you have a technology that has been shown to work in clinical trials, where the technology has been de-risked along the way, that's when you can start seeing in size rounds. And so this happened to be a technology where they had already made a fair amount of progress. They had initiated a large clinical trial with a neighboring state's provider, and that really led to the point where they were able to secure that type of fundraise.
That's awesome. So, I have two daughters, Sophie and Catherine, and they're 12 and 14. And I take them through the Johns Hopkins campus, right? And they walk by some of the medical devices, in particular the Da Vinci. They can sort of see that. And then I just recently heard that Hopkins was sort of early when it came to NLP technology, and some of that technology may have made its way into Alexa. So, is that, can you talk a little bit about that technology? And then, how do students tap themselves in? I mean, what do you think is the best way, if I'm an undergraduate or a med school student or even a business school student, should I just show up fast forward and say, hey, can I help out? Or, do you guys have a formal program to incorporate? So the people who have no idea about the technology or the medical side, maybe they have just a business and accounting background, how can they sort of get involved with some of these really amazing labs and these startup companies and even larger companies?
Well, first of all, and there's a question from the audience that asks this too, so I'm gonna tie both of these in, Jim. It looks like Vishal from the audience has asked us a question, and the answer is yes, yes, and yes. The more talent and entrepreneurial energy and folks who are interested in the entrepreneurial ecosystem, interested in business, interested in having impact through these products, we would love to hear from you. If you're a student, probably the best front door is through what we have set up in the past couple of years called Fast Forward U. It's run by a fabulous and entrepreneurial-minded colleague and team member named Carrie Carden, and she can really help understand if you have an idea, and there are different things you can apply for as a student: accelerator programs, student funding efforts, ways to plug in. If you're not the entrepreneur, if you don't have the idea yourself, but you want to plug into the ecosystem, she can really help with that. So Vishal, I think that's the answer. There are lots of ways for students to get involved. And so I would reach out to the Fast Forward U folks that are on call just for that type of thing. As far as other ways to plug in, we're always looking for business-minded mentors that can help our faculty think about regulatory path or commercial path. And so we have so many alumni, and thanks to our team member, Maddie Stokes, that helps us really find those alumni and plug them into places where we can, where they can have impact and get involved and help our faculty and our students. So we really do welcome that. Your question about Alexa is bittersweet. And I say it because we have one of the most outstanding voice recognition and speech computer science programs in the world. Through that, the leadership of that program is able to educate dozens of students, PhD students every year that go on to work at, whether it's Siri or Google Home or Alexa or any of these programs that are working on voice and voice recognition. Just think how it has changed our lives just in the last few years. A lot of that original scaffolding or original work came out of labs right here at Johns Hopkins, including some graduate students who went on to work at Amazon and helped develop the Alexa. So it's not, unfortunately, one where we were able to protect licensing at royalties, but we do take a lot of pride in the fact that our students have gone on to work in some of the most seminal aspects of the voice recognition industry.
Absolutely. So I'm just curious, like in regards to how can alumni help? How can corporations help? In particular, maybe grow the ecosystem or encourage the development. Do you have any sort of suggestions, and who should they contact if I'm a corporate venture investor or an alumni that's interested in making, I don't know, maybe mentorship or actual investments? Who should they contact?
Yeah, again, we're happy to. At ventures.jhu.edu, there are a number of ways that you can connect with us, whether you're an alum, whether you're a potential corporate sponsor. We have, for example, legal sponsors who provide pro bono hours to startup companies. So any of those ways that you want to dock in, reach out to us. You can reach out to me directly. My email's on the website. If you're an alum, you can reach out to Maddie Stokes, also listed on our website, who can help do that. But in any case, there are lots of ways to connect directly. You can sign up for our Fast Forward newsletter. Obviously, you can follow us on social media. We have a presence there. So lots and lots of ways to dock in. And many of the programs that we've been able to fund and support have come from generous alumni who have said, this makes sense, let's fund more student startups, or let's have an innovation hub. All of that has been possible because of the generosity of foundations, of our alumni, of community members who saw the promise here and who made it real. And now that we have over 40,000 square feet of innovation space that is teeming with dozens of companies, I think that's great. There's another question from the audience that relates to this, and that is, how can students who are not in STEM come together? Well, let me just raise my hand first and say that I was a liberal arts graduate. I was an economics and languages major at a place in Massachusetts called Williams College. And I was not a STEM student. I sort of fell into the world of healthcare investing. And all of these companies need great people that are writers, marketers, that understand social media, that understand financials, that understand communication strategy. For anyone willing to roll up their sleeves and do whatever it takes, there is a role. So Martha, I hope that answers your question. Lots of opportunities for folks, whether it's in, I think you mentioned political science, computer science, others, lots of opportunities for folks to get involved. And again, if you're a student, please check out the offerings of Fast Forward U. We do lots of events in non-pandemic times. We obviously have virtual events now, but we've got a really wonderful team there that can help navigate and get you plugged in.
So, I have another question just to go back a little bit, but, now that you've taught the entrepreneurial finance course, I'm curious, can you talk a little bit about some best practices and when it comes to entrepreneurship and innovation, and maybe how should we improve our course, right, on entrepreneurial finance? And, it's open-ended, so, feel free to take it however you want to. I mean, suppose that you had access to the Maryland pension fund, so capital wasn't a question. Suppose you had access to, the best minds, most, faculty, staff, students, researchers, right? How would you mix it all up? And, how would we lay down these best practices so that, we're abiding by whatever rules and regulations that we have, because, we want to do this innovation in the right way out of Johns Hopkins.
Sure. Well, I think a lot of it comes down to successful entrepreneurial enterprises come down to really identifying the pain point. What is it that we don't have that we wish we have? What problem are we trying to solve? What are we trying to do that is difficult and that others have not been able to do? And I think if you look back at great companies that have been funded and built over time, they really listened and understood their customer. The best example of this, going from really nothing an idea to today, where some would argue too big, is Amazon, right? So Jeff Bezos's claim to fame is listening and understanding the customer. And I remember early on that Amazon was one of the first places that you didn't have to enter your credit card number every single time you bought something, right? You return to the site, you could figure out then it was, of course, just books. People are probably too young to remember this, but at the time it was just books that they had, right? And whatever book you wanted to buy, you type in and you could just click buy it. You didn't have to go find your credit card, or maybe your credit card, whatever it is. And so I think the seamless, and he really was the pioneer. I think that company was a pioneer in a lot of the way payments and e-retail, of course, is done. And I think one of the singular focus, almost at I think he calls it the day one strategy, just really understanding what does the customer need, what does the customer want. That is what will drive revenue and value over time. And so one of the things that we, not only in the entrepreneurial finance class where we spent time on the business model canvas, is the I-Core program. So this is some of you may be aware or not, this is a nationally funded program that really helps those in technical roles, such as the faculty here at Johns Hopkins, better understand the customer and what is needed. So rather than saying, oh, well, my technology is great, I'm a hammer looking for a nail, it's really trying to understand what the customer's needs are. And so this I-Core program, run by a wonderful member of our team, really helps to identify teams that could benefit from this type of program. And what you're forced to do, it's actually kind of scary and painful and valuable all at the same time. You actually are forced to go out and speak to a certain number of customers. Initially, it was 100 people within, I think, 3 months that weren't related to you, about what it was that you're inventing. So if I came up with a new idea for a pencil that never had to be sharpened, right? Instead of going out and saying, oh, do you want to use my pencil? I would go out and talk to people that do a lot of writing with pencils and say, well, what is it? And then if you find out slowly, well, it's a real pain to have to keep sharpened pencils at my desk, right? So what you're trying to do is get to the heart of what makes that issue so difficult. I think it's one of the reasons I mentioned a company called ProTennis before. one of the reasons I think they were so successful is that early on they partnered and really listened and were mentored by a gentleman at Johns Hopkins Medicine named Peter Green, a clinician named Peter Green. And Peter Green, who helps to run all of our electronic medical records, he's point on so many of the systems here at Johns Hopkins. He had several things that he could identify as a customer that he would like to see software solve. And so, Nick, and to their credit, Nick and Rob, instead of going off and saying, well, this would be interesting, and they really listened to Peter, they listened to Peter's peers, they tried to understand what is it about being a hospital CIO that is so vexing? What is it that internal audit groups can't do with software today? And they came to that. So I think that for me and the journey that I've been on in the last decade as an entrepreneur and enabler of entrepreneurs, it's really understanding the marketplace, who your customer is, and how you can meet that customer. And if I could just say one more thing, Jim, we really try to bring that mentality. The entire team at JHTV brings that mentality to work every single day. And so whether you are in our contracts group and you're processing, we process almost 4,000 material transfer agreements a year. The customer in that aspect is the faculty member and the company that they're working with, or the other institution that they're working with, and they really try to meet those deadlines. What is your time frame? When do you need this? How can we assist you and help you? And everything from that all the way to and through our corporate partnership group that concierges pharma, biotech, technology companies in who want to work with our faculty. How can we make it easy? How can we make this daunting bureaucracy accessible for those of you that want to impact the world for the better? By the way, I see we have another question, Jim.
Okay, so before we go to that question, one other thing. Did you know that Bezos actually worked at D.E. Shaw, which was a hedge fund in New York City? And the other thing that I always sort of think about when he was starting out, he says that everything starts small, right? So, if you're interested in, doing some entrepreneur stuff, just go and join a startup at, JHTV. It doesn't have to be, it can be really small and just see how you can add value. I encourage my students to go out there and try a lot of things because part of the learning process is also understanding what you don't want to do, right? And so how do you know that? Well, you just try a bunch of things out, especially when you're in school. So I do see a question here, and now we're going to sort of shift the conversation to COVID. It says, how has COVID forced entrepreneurs to pivot? And do you think these changes will carry on after the pandemic ends? So that's a very interesting question.
Yeah, Marian, thank you so much for your question. We have spent really, as so many of us at Johns Hopkins have in the past, I guess, what is it now, 4 months, spent time really thinking about this. And we actually have cataloged the various technologies that we know about that have either been reported as inventions to our office or being worked as research projects. And there are a number from testing to data to hopefully treatment at some point, all being worked on here. And I think it depends a bit. Your question is, how have entrepreneurs pivoted? If you take someone like Sebastian Seger, who, by the way, is a Carey Business School alum, he grew up here in Baltimore. He ran a business in Europe prior to returning to Baltimore, and has been running a very successful healthcare IT business for the past several years, primarily focused on making sure people take medicines to keep them healthy and alive. And he realized that he had the infrastructure with his asynchronous video platform, with his HIPAA compliant software, with the app that had already been rolled out to millions of customers, that he had the ability to help organizations think through their COVID response. And so that organization, it's one of those, there's a joke that your success comes after 10 years, right? You're a 10-year overnight success. This is one that Sebastian and his team toiling for years and years and years, and this opportunity came, and they're really taking advantage of the ability to use their platform for good. Other labs here at Johns Hopkins, for many of the folks in oncology and immunology and rheumatology, turned their attention as the pandemic roared its ugly head to focus on what they could do. So I can think of several examples of faculty members here who really halted their day-to-day research to make sure that happens. As far as the sustainability here, I think it really depends on how this all plays out. I can't predict. I mean, I think what it means for companies like Emoca is that they were able to scale, and hopefully that will open all sorts of new doors to them. For others, I think only time will tell, but it's certainly the energy that has been harnessed out of this organization from people like Lauren Gardner, who worked on the map that very quickly became and still is the standard of care, to Beth Blauer and her group that have worked on US data and really tracking all of that. I mean, just some really incredible examples. And of course, Tom Inglesby and friends at the Center for Health Security at the School of Public Health, of course, the #1 school of public health in the world, the Bloomberg School of Public Health. All of these interlocking organizations that are working so hard on innovative solutions it really makes me proud as a Hopkins employee, as a Baltimore resident, to just have a front row seat to it all.
Absolutely. And it's really exciting just to see how much energy and how much passion people are in terms of trying to solve this COVID problem for, not only the US, but the rest of the world. But, I mean, do you have any sort of thoughts about the next 5 years? Do you have any, we want to make some predictions? I mean, what kind of resources do you need? What do you need in order to continue to have the success that JHTV has had? Do we need more capital? Do we need more researchers, more students, more disclosures? Should we position ourselves, more to the software side, or do you see a lot of opportunities on the biotech side? Just tell us a little bit about your vision of the future in the next 5 years. Where are we headed for JHTV?
Yeah, thank you, Jim. I've given this a lot of thought recently. We go through an exercise every spring into the summer of identifying our 5-year plan and refining that, fine-tuning it. Where are we? Where do we want to go? So I've certainly spent some time over recent weeks and months really thinking through this. And I'll say that I'll come to the clearest pain point, but let me just say that one of the things that I'm most proud of the team in this organization is that the schools and donors stepped up to invest in this enterprise 5, 6, 7 years ago. And for every dollar invested, we have returned $4. Wow. So, that is quite an ROI in a very short period of time. And I think just shows that we, as a business entity, as a unit, can deliver value back to our stakeholders. So I think, just as far as sustainability goes, I just want to thank our internal and external investors and donors for making all this possible, for believing in the vision, for believing in the mission. This was not really a part of the Hopkins DNA for many years. This was not a priority, and to really make that bet and believe in it, from President Daniels to the various deans, I'm just so grateful that that we are where we are. I think the biggest, so there are a lot of boxes that were checked. We wrote an innovation report. We went around the country. This was a commission that the president and deans established. It was chaired by Drew Pardal and Jennifer Alicieff, 2 of our most esteemed entrepreneurial faculty. And we went around the country and we looked at great entrepreneurial ecosystems. And we came back and held a pretty harsh mirror up to ourselves and said, what do we need that we don't have? And again, a lot of it was just scale and infrastructure. The innovation was always there. We always had ripe seeds, but they weren't necessarily falling into fertile soil. And so trying to plant as many of those seeds in fertile soil with plenty of light, plenty of water, plenty of everything you need to make this ecosystem happen was something that this report spelled out. So we had, I believe, 23 recommendations. We've checked the box on virtually every one of those. And so to have established what we've established and taken on some of the toughest issues, I really think we're proud of where we are and what we've been able to do. I think the single pain point that continues to rear rear on us day after day, week after week, is where can we find the entrepreneurial talent to run the companies that are developed out of technologies here? We have no shortage. In fact, we have the best scientists and researchers, students, faculty in the world, bar none. They are smart and engaged and innovative and solving the world's most vexing problems. And I say that with sincerity. We're not creating the next Snapchat to get teenagers further addicted to social media. We're not creating the next, whatever it is that's going to make the world a more divided and tough place. What we're doing here is actually making the world a better place. I'm very proud of that, and I think that's why our team is so energized to get out of bed every day. But if we can continue, and this comes back to a question you asked earlier about engagement from the community, from businesses, from students, from others, the more we can engage and tap into folks that have built and sold businesses, so exited entrepreneurs in our parlance. For those that are moving back to Baltimore, we've had a lot of success with people that have gone on to stake their claim, make their name in other ecosystems such as Boston or Northern California that have returned here. There's a real pull in Baltimore to come home and make a difference. And so for those that can help us partner with all of our organizations, from our social innovation lab to our most mature companies and everything in between, we need that entrepreneurial talent. We need folks as advisors, as board members, as angel investors, as those that can really help us think through the business plans to have more of an impact.
Maybe talk about the investment side, right?
Okay.
Do we have enough capital here? There's always been some talks about venture investing, the pension fund or institutional investors or maybe alumni investors. How are we doing on that end? I'm just curious. And I know it's not Hopkins sort of way to create we're not for profit. We're not a venture capital. We're not venture capitalists, but how do we incorporate those people, bring them into the conversation, maybe have a platform for them to see the next, Vogelstein or Thrive company or the next Emoca, right? How do we make that, do we need to connect the dots even? Or is it working pretty well right now? I mean, you're like front and center in between the inventors, right? And the capital. So how are you seeing that developing right now at the sort of 5-year mark or 6-year mark?
Sure. So just a few thoughts in no particular order on this. The first is that with my investor hat on, looking back to where I sat on the proverbial other side of the table, I think one of the things where we can potentially make a big difference here is acknowledging the shortfalls in the way the current venture industry works. And can we make a dent in that? And I say that for those of you that are familiar with these stats, they're staggeringly awful. Less than 2% of venture capital in this country goes to female-led businesses, and less than 1% of venture capital goes to businesses started by people of color. I find both of those statistics unacceptable and have spent a lot of time with my team thinking about how to change that. What can we do? What can we do to change the way that things happen? One of the great unsolved mysteries is that people like to invest in what they know, understand, and can relate to. And when you have an industry that is dominated primarily by white men, they tend to invest in the same type of person. So I think the change needs to come across the board, but certainly really looking at the venture community and understanding, can they really diversify their partner ranks? And can we hold them accountable to that? So I think those are big existential questions that I think, particularly at this moment in time, we have to take head on, and that I think are quite important as we move forward. For the companies where that are ready to start and are ready to raise seed capital, A-round capital, what have you, we really do pride ourselves on a robust process to do that, meaning we get these folks ready to speak to investors. Okay, we have a guide that talks to people how to create. We will sit with them and work on the pitch deck. We will tell them if they are not ready. We have hard conversations and try to help them through. We help them try to build the team, try to build the case. Again, the I-Corps program is just one example of doing that. But once we've helped them along with the pitch and gotten the business to the point, maybe through its translational funding, through mentorship, to the point where they're ready to speak to the investment community, our secret sauce has been an individual that I mentioned before named Jorge Aquino, who does nothing but call on the venture industry, and lately has put together an entire strategic plan to think about seed investing and what that will take. So is that engaging family offices that like to invest early? Is that engaging alumni who have the capacity to be a value-added investor? How can we engage those individuals? And what I will say to date is that I think the work that Jorge and his team have done in working with the venture community and bringing those companies to town, the proof of the pudding is in those numbers, as I mentioned. More than a tenfold increase in the venture dollars coming in. So can we always use more investors in seed rounds, and particularly in investing in a diverse range of entrepreneurs? Absolutely. And so, folks that have the capacity and ability to do that, we would love those intros. And structurally, I think that it is unlikely that we as an institution will have a venture fund, but I think it's really important to partner with folks who can bring to bear those resources, and we can provide as much support as we can to make sure our startups and our faculty and students are ready to have those conversations.
All right, so we're going to get some questions in here for our rapid fire chatting. From Jonah, it says, in recent years, large companies have often helped advance the conversations on social issues. What role can entrepreneurs and JHTV play in that space?
Yeah, look, I think there are many ways. First of all, holding our own JHTV accountable. So I'm very proud to say that our group is comprised of more than 30% of people of color. I think that we are continuing to find ways to diversify within our own ranks. We also are trying to support as diverse a group of entrepreneurs as possible. This entire year, we're running a program for women innovators and entrepreneurs that we kicked off early this year. We actually got a grant to fund that and make that a very formal project. And we've connected senior faculty who are females who've not really been engaged historically to our youngest undergrads and everywhere in between. So we're really focused on that. I think that we need to really think a lot about entrepreneurs of color and how we can support them. I think along with every other major research university, along with every entrepreneurial ecosystem, we need to really dig deep and figure out how to bring those in. I think the direct answer to the question is supporting the types of organizations that our Social Innovation Lab supports, that are moving for social change, that are working on social issues. The more we can help those organizations scale, hire, build, proliferate right here in Baltimore, the better off we will all be.
Absolutely. So I know Eduardo, he's actually a student of mine, brilliant. Everyone should hire him. I think he's looking for an investment banking job, hopefully in Baltimore, but who knows. He has a question. What are some of the advantages that our local ecosystem offers that are unique in comparison to other major hubs?
Yeah, no, I love this question. Thank you, Edgardo, because I do spend, I like to say I wake up every day for two reasons. And if something I'm asked to do is not one of those two reasons, I politely decline. One is to bring as many technologies from the labs and dorm rooms of Johns Hopkins to market. And the second is to build the Baltimore ecosystem. So I do spend a lot of time working across town. One of the things I have very little tolerance for is silos, whether it's within Hopkins or throughout the Baltimore community. So I know on a first name basis and on a speed dial basis, the other friends around town who run entrepreneurial hubs, my friends at the University of Maryland, at Spark downtown at the Emerging Technology Center, that's on Haven Street here in East Baltimore, really across the board, the Jeff Cherry who runs Conscious Venture Labs, trying to do as much as I can with other groups and organizations that can really form that connective tissue to the ecosystem. I think the main advantage that we have here in Baltimore is that it is incredibly accessible. If you want to roll up your sleeves and work and be a part of this, there is a place for you. To me, I can't speak, I've not lived in Boston, I've not lived in San Francisco, but to me, that culture feels much more closed off. It's not the type of place here that is embracing and doing everything we can for the community. I'll give another example. A non-Johns Hopkins company called Catalyte is a tech company with a model that hires people from diverse backgrounds and provides a test for them to enter in software development. You don't have to have a degree from Johns Hopkins in computer science to get a job in software development. You can be trained by Catalyte to do so, and they've trained thousands of folks right here in Baltimore for software jobs and provide software solutions for companies. So I think from Catalyte to the Social Innovation Lab to the types of companies at Gardo, there is a place for folks that want to be a part of this, that want to change the world for the better in a very accessible way.
So, in the entrepreneurial finance class, there's two sister entrepreneurs. I'm going to give them a shout out. Fresh meet you, Crystal and Natalie. They are talented technology software entrepreneurs based in Baltimore. And if people are interested in investing in the ecosystem, they have been very nice to hire some of our students as interns, and they've contributed substantially to sort of the entrepreneurial finance education side. I'm going to move on to Tim. His question is, what are the ways that JHTV is working to support and grow businesses with an eye towards diversity? I know you covered a little bit of this, but maybe you can add a little bit more. I know your staff is very well diverse. What about the entrepreneurs and what about the investors? You mentioned the VC. We're well aware of those issues, right? What about the entrepreneurs? Do we have a well-diversified sort of portfolio of entrepreneurs that we're encouraging in the ecosystem, or what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, not nearly where I want to be, and I think you, as Mike Bloomberg, our most famous alum himself, says, you can't better something unless you can measure it, right? And so I think it starts with really understanding what our technologies are, who our entrepreneurs are, what we can do, what the interests of the individuals are, and doing our best. And so I mentioned our program for women this year. I think we need to really put a lot of thought into working with our Office of Diversity and Inclusion and thinking about the types of programs that we can put together. I think it's everything from mentorship to funding to various grants we can do for space and other things. So I think there's a lot we can do. There was one more question. I know we're running close on time, but
yeah, this will be the last question, but this is actually from a doctor. She's the chief medical officer at DuPont. I believe this is Dr. Sherman. Her question is, where can I learn more about Hopkins founded businesses?
Well, I am just delighted that you asked that question. Thank you, Dr. Sherman. On our website, we actually list every single company that was created out of Johns Hopkins technology. So that is ventures.jhu.edu, or you can just type in JHTV and it should take you right there. We have a whole page dedicated to not only our technologies, you can actually search for unlicensed technologies if you're looking for green energy or diagnostics, whatever you're looking for, you can search technologies. There's also a whole page of our startups that have been created and they're part of our programs that are listed. And so any and all of those aspects of what you want to look at is searchable. And if you have any trouble whatsoever, just reach out to me and we'll help.
Congratulations again. You've done an amazing job with our ecosystem, and it's definitely changed the landscape in Baltimore and also at Johns Hopkins. So I applaud you. Please do continue to teach courses in the business school. And for anybody who's watching, how should they contact you? Through LinkedIn or email, or what's the best way to reach you?
Yeah, my email's on the website. LinkedIn works. I'm on Twitter, christyweiskill, CWYSKIEL on Twitter. My DMs are open. So any of those that work. And again, we're always delighted to hear from our friends and alums, and thank you for all that you've done. And Jim, thank you so much for being a great bridge with Alex, the Dean of Carey, and so many others, because we need more business students involved. I actually had a call with my team right before this one about how to get more business students involved. And so thank you so much for being a beacon of light there.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.